In the summer of 1941, Europe stood balanced on a dangerous illusion of peace as Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, two ideological enemies, remained bound by a fragile non-aggression pact signed in 1939, a treaty that shocked the world and secretly divided Eastern Europe between Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, allowing Poland to be crushed and the Baltic states erased while the world believed cooperation would last. Yet behind closed doors, Hitler never intended to honor the agreement, viewing the pact not as peace but as a pause before conquest, a strategic lie meant to buy time while Germany prepared for a war that would shatter the continent and redefine human suffering. For Adolf Hitler, the Soviet Union was not an ally, but an inevitable target, a vast land he believed was destined to be conquered for Germany's survival. Driven by his obsession with Lebensraum, the idea that the German people required endless Eastern territory for expansion, resources, and racial dominance, and as Nazi propaganda painted the Slavic people as inferior and Bolshevism as a mortal threat, Hitler quietly redirected factories, railways, and armies toward the eastern frontier, convinced the Red Army would collapse in weeks, and that history itself had chosen him to destroy Stalin and reshape Europe forever. Despite a growing chorus of warnings from British intelligence, American diplomats, and even German defectors who risked their lives to reveal invasion plans, Joseph Stalin dismissed every alert as Western provocation, believing Hitler would never dare fight a two-front war and trusting the pact more than his own generals, leaving the Red Army crippled by fear, purges, and paralysis as aircraft sat lined up defenseless, ammunition remained locked away, and commanders waited for orders that never came, creating a perfect storm of vulnerability just as the greatest military assault in history prepared to strike. At 3:15 a.m. on June 22, 1941, the silence along the Soviet border shattered as German artillery opened fire without a declaration of war, unleashing Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion involving more than 3 million Axis soldiers, thousands of tanks, aircraft, and guns surging forward from the Baltic to the Black Sea, destroying Soviet airfields before planes could take off and overwhelming stunned defenders in minutes, as Hitler's ultimate betrayal unfolded at dawn, transforming diplomacy into devastation and peace into total war. German forces advanced with terrifying speed, encircling entire Soviet armies in vast pockets of destruction as cities like Minsk, Smolensk, and Kiev fell one after another. Millions of Red Army soldiers were captured, starved, and marched into brutal captivity, and Nazi commanders celebrated what seemed like an unstoppable victory, convinced Moscow would soon fall and the Soviet Union would collapse under the weight of Germany's lightning warfare, unaware that their rapid success was blinding them to the dangers of distance, resistance, and time. Operation Barbarossa was not merely a military campaign, but a war of annihilation, as Hitler ordered the execution of political commissars, the destruction of villages, and the systematic murder of civilians, while Einsatzgruppen death squads followed behind the front lines, slaughtering Jews, prisoners, and entire communities, believing terror would crush resistance. Yet this brutality achieved the opposite, hardening Soviet resolve, fueling hatred, and transforming the conflict into a fight for survival in which surrender became impossible. By the autumn of 1941, German forces reached the outskirts of Moscow, able to see the city's spires and believing victory was within reach. But Hitler's indecision and strategic mistakes diverted crucial forces, delaying the final assault as rain turned roads into mud and winter descended with merciless force, freezing engines, jamming weapons, and killing soldiers unprepared for the Russian cold. While Moscow held firm, defying the belief that the Soviet capital would fall before the year's end. As German momentum collapsed in the snow, Stalin recovered from shock and unleashed a massive counteroffensive, deploying fresh Siberian divisions trained for winter warfare to strike exhausted German troops, pushing them back from Moscow in a stunning reversal that marked the first major land defeat of Hitler's army, shattering the myth of Nazi invincibility and signaling to the world that Germany could be beaten. What Hitler believed would be a swift conquest became a brutal war of attrition as the Eastern Front consumed men and material on an unprecedented scale, with Germany suffering catastrophic losses and the Soviet Union enduring millions of deaths yet refusing to collapse, setting the stage for future disasters at Stalingrad and Kursk, where the balance of power would irreversibly shift and Hitler's betrayal would continue to drain the strength of the Reich. Operation Barbarossa, intended to secure Hitler's empire, instead sealed Nazi Germany's fate, for by betraying Stalin, he awakened an enemy of immense size and determination, one that would drive relentlessly westward until Soviet forces raised their flag over the ruins of Berlin, while Hitler, who trusted no one and spared no mercy, ended his life isolated and defeated, leaving history to remember Barbarossa not as a triumph, but as the moment Germany began its irreversible descent toward destruction